to relax. Gerard Fabiano hung out all day watching Reed Duke play, rooting on his good friend he came down here with, Braun-Duin. Well, he lives here, so he just went home, hung out with Todd Anderson and Brad Nelson to get ready for today. And he's going to lead his day off with a copy of Gitaxian Probe. He'll see a Sylvan Library, 2 copies of Thoughtseize, an Abrupt Decay, a Counterbalance, and 2 copies of Bayou.
So again, a bizarre hand.
Yes.
The 2 Bayous, not a great pairing with Counterbalance. But a hand that is very well suited to attack Jeskai Stoneblade. There's some disruption here. He can answer the board, and he has a powerful source of card advantage in Sylvan Library.
Gerard looking to draw a copy of Sunken Ruins, I believe, so that he can cast his Counterbalance, though. Doesn't have one of those in his deck, as he will see Brian cast a Ponder. BBD will take a look at the top 3 cards, see where he wants to put them. We'll see if a shuffle or a keep will happen here in just a moment. His legacy action is underway.
In Gerard's defense, those are the only 2 Bayous in the list.
That's just unlucky.
That is quite unfortunate. Gerard also taking some liberties with his mana base. He does have a couple basics, but very non-basic dense. Part of that is just because Wasteland has really receded from the format.
It's a Thoughtseize to start things off here for Fabiano. He'll take a look at Braun-Duin's hand. A Treasure Cruise, Gitaxian Probe. There's a Polluted Delta, along with a Scalding Tarn. You see Stoneforge Mystic. And Lightning Bolt. Pretty good hand there for Brian.
Although this is something that Gerard's Thoughtseizes can do some real work against. He can take the Stoneforge Mystic right now, and then with his follow-up Thoughtseize, he can take the Treasure Cruise. Or he could just take the Treasure Cruise straight away, knowing that he has Abrupt Decay to answer the Stoneforge Mystic, and then use the other Thoughtseize somewhere else down the line.
And do a little equipment check here for Brian, just a Batterskull. And only 2 Stoneforge Mystics, where we're so used to seeing players playing 4 in Legacy. So Brian's equipment count is a little bit lower. Unzawa's Jite is hiding out in the sideboard. So he's built his deck a little bit differently, as Fabiano does take Treasure Cruise.
And I like that selection from Gerard. I think a lot of players' instinct would have been to take Stoneforge Mystic in that spot because Brian's kind of far away from casting the Treasure Cruise, and, you know, you don't want to give him a turn to play. But this matchup is going to go on for a long time. Every time Gerard's able to get a Treasure Cruise out of BBD's hand preemptively, that's a big victory for Gerard.
And Gerard's draw step last turn was a copy of Liliana of the Veil, so you just want to really just get after his hand. And don't let him resolve a card like Treasure Cruise. Here's a copy of Young Pyromancer, and that might change things here for Fabiano. Now there's a Gitaxian Probe, which will bring an Elemental Token along with it. And Brian will see that Gerard did draw Liliana of the Veil. There's, again, Thoughtseize, Sylvan Library, Abrupt Decay, Counterbalance, and a Bayou there.
So that Young Pyromancer is pretty bad news for Gerard. His Abrupt Decay is now more taxed than he would prefer, and the Liliana in his hand has gotten a lot worse.
Fabiano going to draw a card, picked up another copy of Abrupt Decay. That's not so bad. Right now he just needs blue mana, though Sylvan Library can maybe help him get there. In the meantime, he'll just Abrupt Decay Young Pyromancer, get that off the table and pass the turn back. BBD just with an elemental token out there from the Pyromancer. We'll see how he wants to move forward on his 3rd turn of the game.
Picking up that Abrupt Decay last turn, pretty good for Gerard, as now he has an answer to both the Young Pyromancer and to the Stoneforge Mystic.
In for 1 comes Brian. Fabiano going to come down a little bit lower. Looks like he'll move down to 17. Both players just confirming life totals. This is Stoneforge Mystic. BBD will go searching. Batterskull is, of course, what he's going to find. And we pass the turn back. Fabiano will draw a card. Again, Liliana in the grip. The question is, does he draw the 3rd land? Could use some blue mana here as well. There is land number 3. It's a Misty Rainforest, so one could argue that's perfect, as here is a Thoughtseize. Perhaps Brian has worked his way into a Brainstorm here.
Even still, this Thoughtseize is pretty solid for Gerard, as otherwise Gerard would have likely Abrupt Decayed the Stoneforge Mystic this turn, and then Brian could have untapped, shuffled away the Batterskull, and generated some card advantage that way.
Brian going to search up a land with the Scalding Tarn again in response. Volcanic Island's what he's found. It's so interesting. The dynamic of Legacy has changed so much with the addition of Treasure Cruise and the removal of Wasteland in a lot of decks.
And you can see why Treasure Cruise matters so much. These players are going to spend a lot of time trading resources. They both have a couple permanents that are problematic for the other to get off the table. If Gerard's able to stick Sylvan Library, that's pretty bad for Brian. If Brian's able to resolve a Treasure Cruise, it's bad for Gerard. And so in an attrition-oriented matchup, just drawing cards is one of the most powerful things you can do.
Brainstorm's going to resolve. Brian will show him some certain cards here. It's another Brainstorm. A Source of Plowshare is a Lightning Bolt and a Flooded Strand.
And I anticipate Gerard will take Brainstorm out of this hand because he's on this card advantage control route with Sylvan Library and Liliana. The removal spells just don't matter that much right now.
Oh, Brainstorm's going to bite the dust. You did call it. The removal spells will be left over in Swords and Bolt, along with Flooded Strand. So Fabiano will write the contents of the hand down. We'll see if he wants to fire off that Abrupt Decay right now. I imagine he does, as it wouldn't surprise you that Batterskull would be Brian's draw step.
Although maybe not. If Brian's anticipating that Gerard has a removal spell, he might have put the Batterskull 2 cards down and then planning to shuffle away with the Flooded Strand. It's high risk, high reward here for Gerard. I still anticipate he's going to kill the Stoneforge Mystic, but there could be a little cat and mouse game going on here.
No, he's not going to risk it. Abrupt Decay is going to take care of Stoneforge Mystic, and we'll head back Brian's way. Remember, Brian didn't see that Abrupt Decay. That was one of Gerard's draws post-Gataxian Probe, so that was new information to BBD. But he sure did learn it quickly. Just has an elemental token out there, lost a Brainstorm. There's a Flooded Strand. Here's an attack for 1. Fabiano's going to go down to 13. We'll see what Brian wants to do. Just going to pass the turn back over to Fabiano. So Fabiano's plan here really is just kind of grind you down and get really attrition-y.
Oh yeah, he's settling in for a long one. Though his list does not have that many answers to Batterskull if it resolves. If the board's empty, Liliana the Veil contains it. Jace the Mind Sculptor can buy him a little bit of time. He has 4 copies of Thoughtseize, which maybe not matter.
It's time to go for a cruise here for Fabiano. So 3 cards coming here for the Grand Prix Baltimore champion. There's an island for his land, a beautiful one at that. And he'll just pass the turn back. So he'll take this turn to gas back up. An attack here from 1 from Braun-Duin will put Fabiano down to 12. Brian going to very quickly sacrifice this Flooded Strand. Perhaps land number 5 plus Batterskull is coming.
I think there's a good chance. Brian's deck does not need that much mana to operate, so if he's doing this, I think we have a 5th land coming and a Batterskull.
There you do see the elemental token that has been attacking. Chris Van Meter, of course. And we'll have a germ token incoming of Brian. So while Van Meter was not able to make day 2, oh my goodness. That is wow.
He's got 2 of them in his deck.
And see, this is the unconventional deck building here from Fabiano is really paying off. The days. You saw Gerard floated a blue mana and then cast days in that situation. But you wouldn't expect days from a deck like this. You know, the deck is labeled as Sultai Control. You wouldn't expect to see a days in this sort of deck. You expect to see days in, we'll say, Sultai Delver. Mm-hmm. But not this kind of strategy. That was a beating.
Now, Gerard on turn 17 can finally deploy his counterbalance.
Time to lock him up. And there's a Sylvan Library as well. 2 enchantments, both very, very powerful in this format, and a passing of the turn. And he knows the contents of BBD's hand with Lightning Bolt and Swords of Plowshares. Yes, he did just draw a mystery card, and for Brian, I imagine he's hoping it's a Treasure Cruise right now, but it is not. So Gerard will use the library.
So Sylvan Library is not quite Sensei's Divine Top, but it does interact pretty nicely with Counterbalance.
Yeah.
Gerard can determine, what am I most worried about Brian resolving at this stage? Leave a card with the appropriate mana cost on top, and try to freeze Brian out of resolving a critical spell.
Would we call it the working man's Sensei's Divine Top? I don't... It kind of is, kind of isn't.
Oh, get that from the vault action out of there. We need to bring up the Legends one. The template on this card is too clear, so I'm not about this.
Yeah, now that's
there
nice.
we go.
Look at that. That is an absolute beaut.
Not totally clear what that means.
Yeah. Well, I'm very clear what this is. This is Jace the Mind Sculptor. Force of Will hardcast here from Brian will take care of the powerful Planeswalker, and we're going to head back BBD's way. He'll get in for 1. Fabiano's down to 10. Let's see if Brian drew a good one this turn or not. Again, Bolt and Sword still in hand. Looks like a Flooded Strand's the other card. Trying to show some strength here in this situation. He'll just pass the turn back. Fabiano's going to library again, but you have to be scared if you're Brian. You're not really getting that much damage across to Fabiano, and Fabiano gets to look at all these cards every turn.
It feels like we're getting to the point where Brian's going to have to find Treasure Cruise.
Yeah.
Because all of his one-for-one trades, Gerard's going to be able to handle pretty easily.
Fabiano probably looking for a top as well to maybe close Brian out of the game. Sylvan Library doing a decent impression of it right now. See, Gerard's able to put together this turn. Does have a Brainstorm over there. Polluted Delta as well. So it can kind of reset things if you'd like. See, Liliana's he's had for some time.
It's interesting. If Gerard has Treasure Cruise, it seems like it could be sweet to draw it soon. But I think that he might be inclined to just leave it on top of his deck because he knows that Brian's way to catch up in this spot is his own copy. And he might just want to float it with the counterbalance.
He's going to go with the Liliana. And we'll see where he wants to go with it. If it's going to go up or down, he's going to take the opportunity to take it down. So what that's going to do is take care of the token and maybe draw out a lightning bolt, maybe not. The interesting thing here is just, again, a little cat and mouse game because, wow, you're just going to take it down. I can just bolt it. Well, maybe I have one on top of my deck with a counterbalance.
Yeah, this is a weird mixture of cards for Brian to try to slog through, that's for sure.
And Brian's not going to make a move. He's just going to pass the turn back. Fabiano's going to Sylvan Library yet again. Be surprised if he has any interest in paying 4 life to get another card, but things are definitely going Fabiano's way right now. Cards go back on top. Fabiano will draw. He'll sacrifice his Polluted Delta, go down to 9. That's a tropical island. And for both of these players, their first on a legacy. They got the job done in Standard yesterday, so they did not have to do battle in this format. Looks like perhaps it's Jace. It'll be a Treasure Cruise, actually. Okay. So Fabiano not electing to keep that on top. Wants his 3 cards instead.
Well, I think that he wants to start plussing the Liliana, and he needs a buffer of useless cards to start doing that. So I'm sure he may have preferred to have the Treasure Cruise floating along here, but maybe he's willing to risk a couple good draw steps here from Brian. What's interesting now is Brian knows that Gerard has no information on the top card of the deck, so there's much more of an incentive to just start casting stuff and hope that things resolve.
Saw both players discard the Liliana, a Swamp for Fabiano, a Flooded Strand there for Braun-Duin. Here's a Stoneforge Mystic.
Remember, Brian's only got the 1 Batter Skull, and that's already been dealt with, so...
And Gerard doesn't even reel it to counterbalance because he doesn't care about the 1-2. I know that all you have is Batter Skull. I've already taken care of it. Players have access to each other's deck lists now here in day 2. And really, it might be more important for Gerard not to give away the information on what's on top of his deck, as now here's an Inquisition of Kozilek. So a lot of discard here in Fabiano's deck.
I think the Bolt and Brainstorm are still known about, or the Swords of Plowshares, excuse me, in the Bolt. So if he's willing to lead with the Inquisition, I think Brian's probably saying, well, odds are he's got a 1 floating, because he knows my hand is all 1-costers.
He'll leave him with the Swords and a Flooded Strand. Now Gerard knows the coast is clear, so now here comes True Name Nemesis. No equipment necessary. Just a powerful 3-1. Now Fabiano can tick up the Liliana if he'd like. I suppose he could tick down as well, but ticking up looks like where he's going to go. He's ready to discard. He'll discard Abrupt Decay. That's how strong his hand is. And he'll pass the turn back over to BBD. Source of Plowshares in Brian's hand. The draw step is currently a mystery, but it'd have to be a pretty good one to get him out of this situation.
Even at this point, I'm not sure if Treasure Cruise is going to be sufficient to pull him out. Gerard's ahead on so many resources, and a Resolved True Name Nemesis is, you know, Brian's not drawing very live against this card.
Not getting that thing off the board, that's for sure.
Really, his one way to beat it, I guess there's 2, is try to overpower a Batter Skull or generate a lot of tokens with Young Pyromancer. Both of those are going to be challenging to do. The Batter Skull's gone, and his hand just doesn't have enough spells to really do anything with a Young Pyromancer, even if he draws it.
Well, Gerard's happy with how he set up his Sylvan Library, so he'll draw a card. Here comes True Name. That'll put BBD down to 10. Liliana, looks like that's going up again, perhaps? Maybe yes, maybe no. It's going to go down. Get Stoneforge Mystic off the table. Fabiano going to play a Polluted Delta and pass the turn back. Over to Brian we will go.
And a lot of this game comes down to that slightly unorthodox Thoughtseize on turn 1 taking the Treasure Cruise. Gerard was able to 1-for-1 everything else Brian brought to the table.
It's worked out very, very well for him. Now he's got a beautiful board, some cards in hand, a Sylvan Library going. And for Brian, he's just at the mercy of his draw steps right now. And the tough part here is he's unsure of what he can even try to resolve because he just doesn't know what that counterbalance is kind of hiding on top. He's going to try Young Pyromancer. See if Gerard has a response. Counterbalance, 2. That'll take care of that. Tarmogoyf just sitting on top, staring Brian back in the face. Fabiano, well, now Sylvan Library. Tarmogoyf among those cards. So he set that up pretty well. You mentioned Young Pyromancer was a way out of this.
Potentially.
Yeah.
I think it's still a long shot at this stage. Things have kind of gotten too far away, but for a little while it was.
Now there is Tarmogoyf. Brian has the Swords of Plowshares in his hand. But
Gerard has set something with that counterbalance. He knows about the Swords of
he
Plowshares.
sure does. And Ryan's not willing to cast it just yet.
I believe his hand is forced here just because the attack's going to be lethal next turn. Though I think that Brian may have picked up Treasure Cruise this turn, which is potentially a game changer.
Well, we'll see if he can find some way to get back into this. Got plenty of cards to remove for Delve.
And right now he's just trying to figure out, is there any way to shrink the Tarmogoyf down? So you can see he's prioritizing creatures. Definitely wants to get his Batterskull out of the graveyard.
Mm-hmm. So that'll shrink Tarmogoyf a little bit here. Now we'll see if Cruise does resolve. That's the question. Now they just figure out what he wants to delve. And that's good to go. So 3 cards coming here for Brian. They're going to have to be a pretty good 3 to get him back into this game.
He's got to be able to kill the Tarmogoyf, which may be impossible if Gerard has set a 1 on top of the deck. So even drawing cards here may not be good enough. Brian's also facing lethal, even if the Tarmogoyf dies in 3 turns.
Quick update for you guys in a backup match as Brian's resolving another Treasure Cruise here, at least trying to. Reed Duke is up a game over Steve Mann, so Duke playing Miracles, up a game over Mann playing Teamer Delver.
It's pretty crazy we've gotten to a spot here where Brian could Treasure Cruise twice in 1 turn and not get to untap
Yeah, it may not matter at all.
in a control matchup.
Yeah. He's drawn 6 additional cards this turn. Not bad. Not bad. But will they help him is the question.
If you can't kill this Tarmogoyf, it's not a huge help.
Yeah. And True Nemesis is already causing a world of problems as well. There's his land for the turn.
The big risk here is that Gerard's just floating a 1. And then you can't cast Swords to Plowshares, can't follow up with extra cantrips, can't try to bolt Gerard out of the game.
Yep.
A lot of lines of play get shut off.
He's just going to pass the turn back over to Fabiano. Sylvan Library. Fabiano's going to set things up. You have to imagine Gerard wants to keep a 1 on top if he can. Looks like he's looking at another copy of True Name there among those cards, however. Life total is 9-7 in favor of Fabiano right now. Board's heavily in his favor as well. Just trying to figure out how he wants to set it all up. Try to close this game out.
It looks like there is no 1 that he can float. It looks
Yeah.
like a land, a True Name Nemesis, and a Tarmogoyf.
Oh, actually, I see a Death Shaman.
Excuse me, Death Shaman. So yeah, he can simply leave the Death on top and draw something else.
Yeah, it all depends on how he wants to set it up. Oh, he's found a configuration he's happy with. Here come the creatures. That's a Vendilion click. I think Gerard has him pegged. Oh my goodness.
Oh,
Yeah. That's pretty filthy. Man.
I was going to say, why wouldn't you just...
Leave the 1.
Yeah, because he snipped out Vendilion Click.
Yeah, he sure did. Now here's Swords of Plowshares going after the Tarmogoyf. Now, is there a way for him to move things around?
He's got a Brainstorm in his hand.
Yeah, it looks like the answer is yes.
Man, Gerard just a sniper with his counterbalance.
Yeah, it's so weird to watch him do it with Library instead of top, but he set it up so well.
2 blind-ish flips.
Yeah, ish is the best way to do it. Yeah,
He knew what he wanted to fight over.
Yep.
He knew what he thought Brian was trying to set up.
Leaving the 3 on top, stiffing up and dealing click there is very impressive.
And now that if this Brainstorm resolves, Gerard can pick up the Deathrite Shaman, put that on top, counter the Source of Plowshares, and move to game 2.
I think Brian might be considering a Force of Will here on the Brainstorm.
When he forces, he goes to 6. So the True Name knocks him down to 3.
Yep.
You can't kill it.
Still in trouble. There's Force. Remove Gataxian Probe. I imagine this is not a battle that Brian wants to pick, but it's almost like he has no choice. So there, Brainstorm will get countered. Tarmogoyf is going to die. Fabiano is going to gain some life here. But as you mentioned, True Name is going to be able to get the job done here, it looks like, as Braun-Duin's going to go down to 3 with really no great way out of this situation. But, hey, this is True Name at its finest. This is what the card does. 2 cards left in Brian's hand. Remember, he drew 6 extra ones last turn.
It is a hole in the armor of many of these Delver decks, many of these Stoneblade decks. They just cannot get this card off the table. When people are playing the black decks, then they get access to Liliana the Veil, the Golgari Charm that you saw Gerard just discard. But for a lot of these decks, it's Pyroblast it when it's on the stack or bust.
Gerard Fabiano going to win game number 1 here over Brian Braun-Duin. Sultai Control up a game over Jeskai Stoneblade. As we turn our attention to the sideboard, we will start with BBD, who does have a Containment Priest, 4 copies of Meddling Mage, an Electrickery, 2 Flusterstorms, a Pyroblast, 2 Surgical Extraction, a Wear Tear, and Uzawa's GT, a Council's Judgment, and a Supreme Verdict. What do we like?
I guess I like the Council's Judgment just fine. But these 1-for-1 cards are not really great for Brian, because I feel like he has to be the aggressor in the matchup. We'll probably see some amount of Flusterstorm Pyroblast action, but I think those, in a weird way, play into Gerard's hands because he's happy to play an attrition battle. So I definitely like the Council's Judgment because Gerard's got a variety of problematic permanents, but I'm not sure if it's really the course of action Brian wants to take.
What do we see on the other side?
2 copies of Nile Spellbomb, a Notion Thief, a Pernicious Deed, 2 Blued Elemental Blast, a Disfigure, a Flusterstorm, a Golgari Charm, 2 Spell Pierce, a Submerge, a Thrun, the Last Troll, a Vendilion Click, and a Liliana the Veil. I like bringing in the Thrun, the Vendilion Click, the Liliana the Veil. Those cards are just kind of generically good in Counterspell Creature Wars. The Disfigure is very good because Brian's got a lot of cheap creatures to kill. The Notion Thief is excellent. Brian's deck, of course, is base blue, draws a bunch of cards. And the 2 Nile Spell Bombs, I think, are fine. Low opportunity cost, and they gave away for Gerard to fight over Treasure Cruise, which, in my opinion, is Brian's best card in the matchup.
Well, you do see the options there available for both players. And as they do continue to sideboard, we will talk about our chat being back. You can join the feature match area today at twitch.tv/SCG Live.
Yeah, you can hop in right now and chat for absolutely free, though if you are not subscribed, you are in slow mode, which means posting once every 2 minutes. If you subscribe, you can post as much as you'd like. You also get custom emoticons and badges, only $4.99 a month.
The emoticons are sweet. If you guys haven't seen them, definitely head over to twitch.tv/SCG Live. Here's just a little sampling. Patrick is what Patrick is. I am probably excited for who knows what reason. Matthias with just a more,
Just happy to be here.
Just happy to be here. Our Jetpack Penguin and our Slow Play Turtle, among many other custom emoticons available. If you do subscribe, $4.99 per month today. Join the feature match area with SCG Live and have fun chatting, but be responsible out there.
Yep.
Be responsible. You know who you are. Be responsible. Be nice. We don't want to see all those stars in the chat. Those are
User
censored
blocked.
words. Yeah. Banned for 600 seconds. You know who you are. Be nice.
Is it too much to ask for? The discourse to just be polite and respectful? Be enthusiastic, but be nice too.
My favorite card right now in this sideboard, Pernicious Deed. I love it.
I hope that he gets a chance to. I guess he's in the opposite bracket. I was going to say if he gets to Ross Miriam, he gets to Deed him.
The best is, we're kind of giving Ross a hard time, but everyone's in on the joke. All the players are just like, your deck choice is terrible this weekend. It is horrible.
I don't think the Blue-Red Delver matchup is very good. And that's a popular Legacy deck because they have Fork Bolts and Electrickeries in the sideboard. Many of the Stoneblade matchups now are playing red, so it's problematic for the same reasons. They have red removal plus Umezawa's Jitte, not a good combination. Terminus, not easy to beat. Bastard combo decks, that's problematic. Gerard's, deck of various cards, some of them are problematic as well.
Yeah. The Deed, the Disfigured, the main deck Golgari Charm. If Ross is able to make it out of group play and make it to elimination rounds, it is very telling how good he is at playing elves.
For sure.
That's exactly what that means. It was awesome just watching, because, you know, the players are out there watching to see where they're going to be drawn, and Merriam is just sitting there hoping that Joe Lissette's not on his side with the Reanimator, because it's arguably his worst matchup in the format outside of something like Belcher. And once Joe got drawn into Group A, he's just like, yes, yes. And I'm like, man, you are really happy that Reed is in your group.
Yeah, you faded the 5% matchup, but you're still facing a bunch of 25%
Yeah.
matchups. I'm not sure what you're.
I've never seen someone so happy to say, I get to play against Reed Duke today with a lot of money on the line, and he's got Terminus in his deck.
Yeah, I don't know.
It's how things go in a tournament like this. It was just the reaction, and then the realization is like, I guess I still have to beat Miracles and maybe the most accomplished player in the room. It's gonna be tough. So, Fabiano, a player you've known for some time.
So, backstory here with Gerard. There was a Pro Tour Houston, where the night before the Pro Tour, my deck was stolen.
Yes.
And
one of my favorite stories.
I was broke. So, Gerard just had a box of cards, and he allowed me to build a deck out of his box of cards. So if you want to see perhaps the worst deck in Pro Tour history, just hop over to the PT Houston archives and search for Patrick Sullivan. But the deck in question actually, in many ways, resembles the deck Gerard is playing here today. I guess I would call this Cards I Own Control. It's a control deck made out of the cards that I own.
Gerard doesn't have the combo that you employed, which was, I believe it was Mesmeric Fiend plus Pernicious Deed.
Right, because you get their card for a little while, then you kill your own creatures, also 4 Birds of Paradise in the list, and then you give them their cards back and you have less mana.
Ah, yes. A classic magic combo. A quick shuffle with the Ponder.
4 copies of Spirit Monger in the deck. Only time that it resolved was because my opponent untapped and played Treachery on it.
Well, why should you get to have it?
I'd rather, he could have just killed it. He didn't have to do me like that,
Just beat you down with the 6/6?
Yeah, because my deck could not kill a Spirit Monger. I was really well equipped for the mirror match because I had 4 Spirit Mongers, and that thing, no one kills it.
Nice. Very nice. Mystery card coming from Ponder here for Brian. Play a Volcanic Island. Just pass the turn back over to Fabiano. Fabiano with the Deathrite Shaman. No fetch land to eat just yet.
Yeah, BBD not willing to commit a fetch land if he can avoid it, because right now Gerard has no land in the graveyard.
But he will in just a moment, or at least if he'd like to. With that polluted Delta, he's going to lead off with a Thoughtseize. See if Brian has something like a Brainstorm here. Doesn't look like he does, though. You can look at his hand. Looks like he's going to be setting it down. And he will. The grip here, 2 copies of Spell Pierce, a Treasure Cruise, a Force of Will, a Young Pyromancer, and a polluted Delta. So, as you mentioned, trying not to play a fetch land. Fabio going to write down the contents of the grip. We'll see what he likes to take with the discard spell.
Well, I think he's happy to strand Brian's hand with as many counter spells as possible because Gerard's deck is just so well suited to play that kind of game. So I assume it's between Young Pyromancer or the Treasure Cruise. My guess would be Treasure Cruise just because Gerard has a lot of ways to kill creatures. Most likely he's brought in the second copy of Golgari Charm, but it looks like he's going with the creature instead.
And there goes Young Pyromancer.
Another argument for Gerard taking the Young Pyromancer here is, if this game is shaping up to be slow, Gerard can use the Deathrite Shaman just to contain Brian's graveyard, and that Treasure Cruise might get stranded anyway. The rest of Brian's hand doesn't really allow him to fill up his graveyard, it's just a bunch of counter spells.
Quick update for you guys. On another match, Ross Merriam, we talked about him quite a bit. He's playing against Tom Ross right now. The Battle of Rosses. Merriam was able to win game number 1, but the boss quickly won game number 2. So Elves versus Infect will be going to game number 3. When we do have an update for you guys on the conclusion of that match, we'll let you know. As Delta's going to search up a Bayou here.
But for as bad as, or as unorthodox, weird looking as some of Gerard's choices are, I think that Brian definitely caught the bad end of this matchup.
I think so.
This is, for all the weirdness, legitimately a bad matchup for Brian.
Fabiano very quickly removes Ponder from the graveyard, so he's going after the graveyard pretty aggressively to make sure that Brian can't do anything with stuff like a Snapcaster Mage or just no Treasure Cruise action. You're going to have to really work for it. Fabiano's shields are certainly down right now. We'll see if BBD can take advantage, but it's just a Delta and a passing of the turn, so the answer is no.
And this is part of the problem with Brian's deck in the matchup. You see his hand of 2 Spell Pierces and a Force of Will. It's going to be really hard for him to do much of anything with those cards. It's hard for Brian to push through anything of note because Gerard can pretty easily swat anything aside that Brian brings to the table. And Gerard has no one critical piece he's trying to push through.
Here's a Tarmogoyf. See how Brian wants to try to deal with this thing. A card that's really been on the decline in Legacy. Given how powerful that creature is, it is staggering to see so little of it recently.
Both players are playing with empty graveyards a lot of the time.
Yeah.
It's more so the case, at least, than it used to be.
Force of Will, removing Spell Pierce is going to go after this, but these are the kind of exchanges that Fabiano wants to make in this deck.
Totally fine. Go ahead. You get to do that. I'll Deathrite Shaman your Force of Will away. Take a couple more points of damage. You still can't do anything with that Treasure Cruise. Got Spell Pierce stuck in your hand that's going to be really hard to do anything with.
Here's a Brainstorm. Brian with another Brainstorm in his hand as well. Fabiano will take a long look at his grip, and he'll let the Brainstorm resolve. So Brian's going to draw 3 cards, Pyroblast, a Tundra, and a Mystery one. 2 going to go back here in just a moment. He's got some real work to do right now.
For sure. I mean, he's got to find a way to get something to stick. He also needs to kill the Deathrite Shaman, because that frees up the Treasure Cruise somewhere down the line, and then Brian can get something going.
And you've already seen that Gerard's willing to aggressively use that thing, so he's going to go after something. Again, you have to imagine here, creature or instant/sorcery. He'll go with the Brainstorm.
Yeah, respecting the possibility that Brian could have Snapcaster Mage, so first order of business is get the castable spell out of the graveyard.
Yeah, Brian with 2 of them in his main deck here. Gerard with land number 4 is a Polluted Delta. Perhaps another discard spell. It'll be another copy of Deathrite Shaman. Card is super annoying. It's also super powerful.
The second Deathrite Shaman's a very nice backup to have, too.
Yeah.
Because Brian's likely trying to draw to some sort of removal spell.
There's a Tundra. Brian sacrificing that in the upkeep as he knew the top cards of his deck due to the Brainstorm. So mystery card coming for the draw step.
Yeah, Brian's hand here, a Treasure Cruise he can't cast, a Pyroblast that Gerard is given no targets for, a Spell Pierce. You know, he's just, there's a lot of parts where it's just hard for him to convert them into real resources.
Looks like Scalding Tarn was the draw. Oh, this is the other good card in his hand. This can make a little bit of magic happen here in Brainstorm.
You can see the pause here from Gerard. He would ideally like to Deathrite Shaman the Brainstorm away, but he also doesn't want Brian to ever get to a point where he has priority and the ability to cast a Treasure Cruise. So you see this Brainstorm now is the 4th card in the graveyard. If Brian plays a fetch land and goes to fetch or casts a Gataxian Probe, I think you're going to see Gerard in response remove the Brainstorm.
3 cards drawn there for Brian. Stoneforge, Mystic, a Flooded Strand, and a Tundra. 2 cards will be going back here in just a moment. But yeah, Gerard's doing everything he can to make sure the Treasure Cruise does not work itself into the equation, which is smart. It's such an important card. There's a Stoneforge Mystic. You saw Brian play Flooded Strand too, so we'll see if the Mystic will resolve. Quick update for you guys in the backup match. Stephen Mann has tied things up here against Reed Duke, so Team Redelver and Miracles will be going to a 3rd game, much like Miriam and Tom Ross also in their 3rd game. No surprise to see these players going deep into their matches in this format.
There's not going to be any free ones here.
Not at all. Batterskull will be searched up. Ryan again does have a copy of Umezawa Shite in the sideboard. Not sure if he brought it in or not.
I would be surprised. Gerard's deck is not that susceptible to the card. He's got Abrupt Decays. Ways to kill all of Brian's creatures. Batterskull also is just much harder for Gerard to answer. So I think it's probably just Batterskull, though perhaps the Jite came in as well.
Fabiano trying to resolve a Brainstorm here on the end of Brian's turn. Brian not going to allow it. Going to try to Pyroblast. That'll take care of that. We'll see if Fabiano wants to use his Deathrite Shamans. It looks like he will. So here's one activation.
Part of this is Brian wants to cast that Pyroblast on anything reasonable because he's just trying to flood his graveyard, overwhelm the Deathrite Shamans, and get to a spot where he can Treasure Cruise.
Now the question is, will he activate Deathrite Shaman again? And it looks like the answer is no.
Well, the second one is Summoning 6, so that...
Oh, I apologize. Yep. Thank you. Delta's going to be the 5th card in the graveyard. So Treasure Cruise is getting a little bit cheaper if Fabiano has one of those. And we do have an update for you guys. We have our first victor in Brad Nelson, who has not lost a match yet this weekend. He wins with Sneak and Show over Joe Lissette playing Reanimator 2-0. So congratulations to Brad Nelson on his win. He starts off 1-0. Yeah, Fabiano. The brainstorm was the bait. The cruise is the real prize.
If Gerard is going to use a Deathrite Shaman anyway to strip a land, then he may want to just do that instead of delving his whole graveyard away. Because if he uses a Deathrite Shaman to get a land out, and if he uses the other Deathrite Shaman to get a spell out, that puts BBD's graveyard down to 3 cards, which means Brian needs a Gataxian Probe or a 5th land to get to his own Treasure Cruise, which maybe he's not able to do.
Yeah, I think he may have just come to that realization right now. It's better for me to get a land out of your graveyard if I can, and now do this.
And even if Brian has land number 5, that means he's not casting the Batterskull next turn or putting it into play, which is a small success for Gerard as well. So
he's done cruising. Fabiano picked up 3 cards. Now Deathrite looks like it might be adding some more mana here. We'll see.
Just really hard for Gerard to keep Brian off of both Batterskull and the Treasure Cruise, because if he kills the Stoneforge Mystic, it's very hard for him not to just fill up Brian's graveyard to the point where he can cast it.
Oh, there's an Abrupt Decay. That'll take care of that. 4 cards in the graveyard here for Brian. There's an island and a passing of the turn. You don't think Fabiano has days again, does he?
He could have his 1 counter spell.
That'll work. That one's good always. Brian going to sacrifice Scalding Tarn.
He's got 2 Spell Pierces in the sideboard.
Yeah. There's land 5. We saw this last game. Days was a beating. Does Fabiano perhaps have days again? Or some other counterspell? Will Brian even commit Batterskull this turn? It doesn't look like he will. He'll go with Treasure Cruise. Does Fabiano have a counterspell? The answer is no. 3 cards coming here for BBD.
It's a big turn for Brian.
Yeah.
It was not clear if he was ever going to get to this card. Gerard kept him off of it for a long time.
Perhaps that's what's most important, is just his ability to keep Brian off of Cruise as long as he can.
There's still other problems. Brian's at 10.
Yeah.
He's got to answer these Deathrite Shamans too. Gerard's resolved his own Treasure Cruise. So he's by no means out of the woods, but it feels like that was the first real good turn of the match for Brian.
Yeah, the rest has just been kind of meh.
If he can follow up with a removal spell for at least one of the Deathrite Shamans, then he's making some headway.
He's got a Gataxian Probe. Not willing to pay 2 life for that. You see Fabiano's hand. A Cruise, a Thrun, and a Blue Blast. Jeez. And Thrun is an absolute nightmare.
Talk
for Brian's deck.
talk about various angles of attack.
Yeah. That is the definition of it.
I mean, BBD does have 1 Supreme Verdict in his sideboard, and he has the Council's Judgment, so there's some...
I mean, there's a way. There is a way to get that off of the table. Don't forget, you can't regenerate off of Supreme Verdict, though.
Yeah, Gerard would need a 6 mana.
Yep.
Which he currently does not have access to.
Yeah, Deathrite not providing anything right now either. No fetch lands down there. But now Thrun showing up to the party does make you wonder if Fabiano wants to cast that, or just say, you know what, Deathrite Shaman, let's get to work. There are a bunch of instants and sorceries in the graveyard. You can start draining them.
You only get to be on camera so many times in your life. And
oh, well, there it is. And that kind of thinking is why we're in the booth. Because I would be thinking the same thing. Well, I only get 1 shot to cast this thing.
I've always been more flash than substance, you know?
Let's show him who the boss is with the last troll. There's a trop.
I paid whatever, $10 for this thing. It's in my hand.
Not going to cast it.
I'm not going to not cast it. I'd rather lose than win with it in my hand.
Gerard thinking maybe about a Treasure Cruise here. Or perhaps Thrun. That was land number 6 after all.
I think it's pretty attractive to play Thrun. He can leave up mana to still activate the Death Rites if nothing happens, and he can regenerate otherwise.
Kaboom. There is Thrun. Do we like the mana he's left available? I think that's the big question. Looks like he's just going to maybe get in for 1 point of damage
Well,
here.
Gerard wants to have multiple options here. He wants to be able to activate the Deathrite Shaman in the event that Brian doesn't do anything of note. He wants to be able to cast the Blue Elemental Blast that's in his hand. And he wants to be able to regenerate Thrun.
Okay.
I think that he could still do all of that by leaving up Underground Sea plus Bayou. Maybe I would like that tap better.
There's Cataxian Probe. Brian's going to pay 2 life this time. He's going down to 7. There's the Blue Blast players, the Treasure Cruise. Here's the update on the Ross Merriam versus Tom Ross match. Elves gets it done over Infect. Ross Merriam is 1-0 in group play. Congratulations to him on what is likely an upset.
This is a really stressful time to lose your first round.
Yes.
Because if you're out of the pod, your tournament's over.
Yeah. Here's Batterskull. That'll come into play.
But
Brian
Batterskull v.
with his
Thrun
token.
with Brian at 7, and there's 2 Deathrights in play. This is one of Brian's best cards in the matchup, and I suspect it's not going to be good enough.
Yeah. Gerard can just slog through it. Brian down to 5. Gerard. Ooh,
This is easier.
Abrupt decay the token. Yeah, that makes it real easy. And that is going to do it. Gerard Fabiano is going to win this match here over Brian Braun-Duin. 2-0. Sultai Control takes down Jeskai Stoneblade. You want to talk about a favorable pairing. That matchup seems very good for Fabiano.
If people are going to be packing Stoneforge Mystic decks, Delver of Secret decks, Miracles, all the normal Magic decks, the not super explosive combo decks, I think Gerard is going to do great here. It's high risk, high reward. Normally we associate that kind of strategy with combo decks, but Gerard might as well be playing Belcher himself. I mean, he's preying on different decks, but it's that polarized.